20 years later, Andy walks back into Miranda's office, wearing the same blue sweater in the newly released sequel to The Devil Wears Prada. But this time, she's not walking into the same world, neither are we. Fashion magazines no longer sit at the center of the cultural power, journalism has been weakened, attention has moved elsewhere. But elsewhere is no refuge. The broader world beyond Miranda's office has also become colder, harsher, and less certain. The economy is trapped in stagnation. Geopolitics is sliding into disorder, and then there is AI, which is not merely another tool, it is beginning to reorder the hierarchy of value itself. What counts as skill, creativity, intelligence, and what kind of human effort still matters? Some see opportunity in this, good for them, but many more feel suspended in their own Odyssey, caught in a long, uncertain passage between a past that no longer works and a future that has not yet taken shape. So you keep moving with confusion, anxiety, and helplessness you can barely name. You try to adapt, stay useful, and become the kind of person the new world seems to require. It is against this dreary landscape that the sequel may disappoint those who expect an even more dramatic spectacle than the original. People keep placing it beside the first film, as if both should be judged by the same standard. But perhaps this more anodyne sequel reflects the anodyne culture of the age itself. Political correctness everywhere, language carefully managed, emotion carefully contained, offense carefully avoided. The first film still belonged to a world where Andy could fire her own boss, walk away and step into a new life. The sequel, by contrast, almost boringly lacks that kind of theatrical release. But so does real life, where you are not a protagonist with cheat codes rushing effortlessly from one victory to the next. I'm not interested in deciding whether the sequel is better or worse than the first. What really touched me was a nearly invisible character, quietly shining at the edge of the story. Only when I decided to build part of this episode around him did I realize I could not even remember his name, Nigel. When Andy rushes to Nigel with the crushing news that departments are being cut and that they may lose their jobs, he answers with measured calm. You know what I think? I think I like the back crossbody. That's what I think. Then Nigel simply turns back to his work. Yes, the institution may shake or it may not. The old world may collapse or it may not. He may be able to do something or he may not. But among all those uncertainties, there is one thing he seems to know for sure, his own value. It may be quiet, subdued, even muted, but it is enduring. Nigel's dignity lies in the fact that even when the house is burning, he still knows where the bag should sit on the body. As Kafka once wrote in his diary, Germany has declared war on Russia when swimming in the afternoon. It is absurd indeed, but in that absurdity, there is a deeper awareness. Catastrophe in life does not always ask for a dramatic answer. Sometimes it asks whether you still know what is yours to value, which is a refusal to let the collapse of the world decide the collapse of the self. When choosing a proper outfit for Andy in the closet, Nigel picks pieces for her and says, "This is quite luxury that is so quiet you need a near trumpet." A similar closet scene happened 20 years ago. Back then, what Nigel offered Andy was not quite luxury, but the famous instruction, "You're in desperate need of Chanel." 2 decades later, Nigel again throws Andy a sequence of pieces, but this time he turns fashion into initiation rather than decoration. A look from Giorgio Armani's Fall-Winter 2026 menswear collection stayed with me. At first, it reads simply as black, but then the black begins to shift under the light. You realize that its force does not come from the quiet, almost liquid luster of the crossed velvet alone, but also from the looseness of the tailoring, the proportion of the jacket, the fall of the trousers, and the way the whole body moves through shadow. What speaks is not the resounding name of the brand, nor its exorbitant price tag, but an unwavering, coherent standard of beauty. It announces itself quietly. Even if the world no longer values what I value, I will not abandon the standard that made me who I am. That awareness is true luxury. In an age that rewards disruption, Nigel represents something rarer, intact continuity, private discipline, and a standard that does not need applause to remain real. so easily taken for granted that perhaps we really do need an ear trumpet to hear him. He has always been there, quietly and steadily, carrying the accumulated treasury of a lifespan looking, choosing and caring. Not chasing the trend, nor yielding to the current. Nigel does not dominate the room like Miranda, nor carry the narrative like Andy, but in the sequel, he is no less compelling than either of them. All three are quite luxury, not because they are polished, powerful, or impressive on the surface, but because each of them carries a deeper value beneath the spectacle of the industry. Their attraction does not come from being clever enough to change with the age, or eager enough to cater to its taste. It comes from being stupid and stubborn enough not to. Sometimes what looks like stupidity is only fidelity to a value the age has not yet learned how to prize. We do live in a monetized and exhausted world. Almost everything is converted into visibility, performance or use, and then measured by price. AI sharpens this condition. What can be measured can be automated. What can be automated may soon lose its authority. So human beings are pushed into a true choice, to remain useful, yet somehow futile, or to become useless, and therefore appear stupid. When usefulness itself is automated, I will not say that uselessness becomes a high measure of value, but it may become the last refuge of the human. Once the old pricing system of value gives way to a new one, everything enters limbo, where change appears to be the only exit into the future. Yes, the future. It has acquired such moral authority that the past is almost stripped of its own legitimacy. We are so willing to change because change is our survival instinct, and yet we remain equally unwilling because we human beings cannot help but cry out to the past. Between willingness and unwillingness there is hesitation, which runs through the whole sequel. Even Miranda hesitates, again and again. She is no longer the determined devil of 20 years ago. The future and the past are human constructs. After all, the only place we actually live is the present, which is rarely pure certainty, pure progress, or pure escape. Hesitation is not a temporary flaw in between, but the true condition of our present existence. It creates an interval in the present, a momentary cushion against the future's inevitable advance. Once we become aware of our hesitation, we begin to see what in us still refuses to disappear. In this process lies agency. Miranda, Nigel, and Andy are successful in their own ways, not because they meet some universal standard of success, but because they know who they are and where they came from. Even without knowing where the journey will lead, they are self-coherent, answering their own questions along the way. Agency matters all the more as AI comes to seem almost omnipotent. There will never be an end to moving forward and changing. But if we merely change efficiently, mechanically, almost robotically, we risk becoming the deployment of AI in the physical world, rather than the other way around. Success, self-improvement, becoming a better person, these are all concepts defined through language, culture, and convention. But today, large language models play the game of human words better than most of us do. This may be the point at which looking back matters more than looking forward. I do not mean that moving on is wrong, but when you're lost and confused, remember this. Behind you lies the long history of clumsy human efforts to remain ourselves, like the Renaissance wall painting in the film, still shining, still lightening the path we came from, still reminding us how the human came into being, and what kept the human human. Look back and you will hesitate. But in the hesitation you may finally know who you are. In the end, Andy walks into Miranda's office wearing that blue sweater again. 20 years ago, Andy thought she stood outside fashion, too serious, too intelligent, too independent to care about clothes. But Miranda revealed that even Andy's refusal of fashion had already been shaped by fashion.
I'm still learning about this stuff and,
This stuff? Oh, okay, I see. You think this has nothing to do with you. You go to your closet and you select, I don't know, that lumpy blue sweater, for instance, because you're trying to tell the world that you take yourself too seriously to care about what you put on your back. But what you don't know is that that sweater is not just blue, it's not turquoise, it's not lapis, it's actually cerulean. And you're also blithely unaware of the fact that in 2002, Oscar de la Renta did a collection of cerulean gowns. And then I think it was Yves Saint Laurent, wasn't it, who showed cerulean military jackets? I think we need a jacket here. And then cerulean quickly showed up in the collections of 8 different designers. And then it filtered down through the department stores and then trickled on down into some tragic casual corner where you no doubt fished it out of some clearance bin. However, that blue represents millions of dollars and countless jobs. And it's sort of comical how you think that you've made a choice that exempts you from the fashion industry when in fact you're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
20 years later, the same object returns, but the subject has changed. This time, the stupid blue sweater no longer speaks louder than Andy. It is her agency. It is her awareness. It is her choice. And finally, Miranda does not see the sweater. She sees Andy.
Go.